Good evening, everybody. I hope you're all well. Hope you're all surviving post-COVID. Thank you so much for joining me here tonight. I know there's participants from across the world, and I'm sending out a very warm welcome to everyone from Northern Ireland. I'm also aware that there's people that are attending who are currently living live with their addiction, or they're supporting a family member through these behaviours, or they've lost someone, someone who meant something to them, a lot to them, to addiction. Every one of you are very welcome, and I'm so delighted that you're here. For those of you who may be unfamiliar with Zoom, because in the last year, I think we've all used it to the death, but just in case anyone who isn't familiar with it, if you go to the top right and you select speaker, you'll be able to view only the person who's speaking. This will cut down on any distractions. Sometimes when people are moving about or they're switching their camera off and on, it can be a wee bit distracting. But also because this is an up close and personal event, we decided to do it as a meeting style Zoom rather than a webinar. And the tickets were very limited to encourage almost like a more intimate experience. And you'll have noticed that when you first came in, you were all muted. And this is to maintain the integrity of the experience tonight, but also the sound quality of the recording, so it can be as clear as possible for when we're sending it out to you later on. So I would invite you all to remain muted, unless of course you're being invited in to engage in the conversation. And you'll then be unmuted by one of the team. I have a team of people that are here with me tonight. When you purchased your ticket, you were welcome to submit a question that you could ask directly to Gabor here tonight. And thank you so much to the people who took the time to send those questions to us. Some fantastic questions that came in, and unfortunately we couldn't pick them all. So I've picked a few of these questions, and I've contacted the people who posed these questions, and I've invited them to come on. So during the chat, when we invite a question, I'll introduce the participant and we'll bring you into the conversation. And then if you just introduce yourself and then ask your question. At the end, time permitting, we will welcome questions from all of you who are here tonight. So to let us know you have a question, just enter them into the chat box. And this is just at the bottom of the screen. And the tech team will be able to see that and they'll let me know that you're there. I have some questions here as well from people who submitted them and who weren't successful in being brought on. So in a follow-up post-event email, you'll receive the recording of tonight's event. So hopefully that's all of the housekeeping that's been done now. And again, if you have any questions about anything, just stick it in the chat box and one of the team will pick that up. So now that's the housekeeping done, let's get stuck in. I am beyond excited, honoured, absolutely delighted to be hosting this webinar here tonight. My name is Vivian McKinnon, and I am the co-creator of 3 amazing humans. I'm also the owner and founder of HydroEase, where we're coming from live tonight. Well, actually in the studio next door to HydroEase. HydroEase is Northern Ireland's only dedicated flotation centre, offering restricted environmental stimulation therapy, flotation therapy. Flotation therapy is an amazing evidence-based approach for physical and mental recovery. I mean, do you live with physical pain? Something like fibromyalgia or arthritis, or do you live with mental pain like anxiety or depression or trauma? Well, imagine a place free from gravity. Imagine a place free from all external stimulation, where the only thing you can hear is your own heartbeat, where you're held and supported and just invited to simply drift away. Well, that's what flotation can offer you. It's 25 centimetres of body temperature water, and half a ton of Epsom salt, and you just float, completely disconnected from the world around you, yet totally connected to yourself. With hugely restricted sensory input and the removal of the need for balance or even movement, the body, the mind, and the spirit gets a chance to completely rest, to realign, to reconnect and re-engage with your whole self. With most of that sensory input restricted, going to the mind and to the body, an internal state of calm just starts to flow through the system. Huge amounts of endorphins are then produced. And endorphins are our body's natural mood enhancers and pain relievers. Both physical and mental pain then begin to reduce. At this point, our skeleton gets a chance to just float inside our body, something it has never had an opportunity to do until that point. I believe this makes flotation the perfect antidote to our modern busy lives. We're not supposed to live the way we live. And in my centre, I have the pleasure and absolute privilege of meeting the most beautiful and inspiring people each and every day. And sometimes I'm afforded the opportunity to be part of their journey. And none more beautiful than my inspiring and amazing guest speaker tonight, Dr. Gabor Mate. And after my first introduction to Gabor's work in around, I think it was about 2007, I then had the honour of spending 4 hours in his company in 2008 when he visited Belfast for the Trauma Summit. We spent time just chatting about life in general, and I was delighted to introduce him to flotation therapy for the first time. Now, this was a huge coup for us, as he lives in one of the most float-rich cities in the world, yet until then had never taken up the offer from my awesome floaty comrades in British Columbia, Vancouver, to float. And after his first experience with us, he shared this insight. He said, after my hour suspended in the pool, my body freed from all external tension and my mind spared all sensory overstimulation. I found myself in a state of relaxation with a feeling of pleasant anticipation. I immediately saw how this technique could help ease stress-related conditions in our frenetic culture. I was delighted with his words. It was such an honour. In Hydroease, you see, I work with people whose lives have been impacted by their experiences, and these experiences they've stored as trauma, both in their body and in the mind. In Hydroease, we invite our guests into a haven of calm, away from our modern society, and offer them a place of personal reconnection where they can just be. Sometimes some of us have forgotten to do this, and you see, the clue is in the title. We are, after all, human beings. Yet we seem to spend a lot of our time these days doing, and we're programmed to believe that we must always be on the go or be stimulated and ready for action. I'm also the creator of my proprietary recovery program called RAFT, which presents opportunities for growth through the insights of lived trauma experience, leading to the integration of self and supporting a sense of belonging rather than a need to fit in. RAFT stands for, the R is for reveal, where I present an opportunity for you to peel back the layers of personal experience and explore blockages or barriers that could potentially be holding you back. A is for accept, taking that new awareness to a deeper level of understanding to inspire the acceptance of the whole self. The F is for forgiveness. This is an interesting word because people think forgiveness is something that we forgive to others, yet its most powerful use is when we offer it up to ourselves. Each of these sessions of engagement with the programme will then have the opportunity to take the learnings from this session into the float, where you become your own therapist in a space that's filled just with you, for you. I'm also the regional coordinator for Smart Recovery, and Smart is an international not-for-profit organisation which facilitates the use of non-confrontational, motivational methods in addiction recovery. I'm an internationally recognised mental health first aid trainer, a public speaker, and lots of different things I do. But my biggest education to date is my lived experience of childhood trauma. Growing up, watching my mother battle with trauma and addiction until her dying day used to be my hidden battle scars that were kept me and my family in the shadows of shame and in the silence of vulnerability. Yet ironically, in the grip of the same pain, almost like a generational inheritance that had been handed down. Yet now I proudly acknowledge these experiences, these years. They're almost like now my badges of honour. And I give thanks to my wonderfully flawed, lovingly polished skeletons that I have now promoted, and they no longer live in the closet behind me. They stand proudly beside me to help me to inspire and motivate others. I am who I am because of the experiences I've had, not in spite of them. And my beautiful mother taught me so much. And when I was ready, the lessons made sense. All of this is delivered and coordinated from my amazing centre just outside Belfast. As this webinar has only been showcased on my social media platforms and website and on Gabor's website, I believe my special guest needs absolutely no introduction. His work in the field of humans individually, whether that means the impact of our childhood has on our experiences, is unrivaled in so many ways. His contribution to the fields of addiction, ADHD, trauma is systematically changing the world as we speak here tonight. His writings, teachings, and vocal contributions are inspiring and healing so many across the globe. Links to his books, courses, and Gabor's proprietary compassionate inquiry training are going to be shared throughout this event in the chat box by the team. His work has been translated into so many different languages, as it has the power to touch each and every one of us and makes absolute sense to me. Gabor's pioneering approach has stimulated so much of my own work, so much of my own recovery, through his authenticity, his compassion, and his simple guidance. His understanding and presence in the world resonates far beyond his physical realm and will continue to do so for generations to come. So lovely people, I give you Dr. Gabor Mate. Good evening, my friend. How are you?
Hello, Vivian. Nice to see you.
Yeah, you too, you too. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
And it's about 11:30 where you are, isn't it?
Half past what?
Is it 11:30?
For my time, yes.
Yeah, yeah. So Gabor, I set this up so that your book In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts really massively impacted my life. It was one of the books that I read and put down and was just like, wow. And up until then, I had never even heard of the Realm of Hungry Ghosts. I never knew the Wheel of Life from the Buddhist perspective. So can you speak to people and tell them about your book, tell them about the Realm of Hungry Ghosts and what that means to you?
Well, so to backtrack a bit, I was a family physician in private practice for 20 years doing that and also doing palliative care. And then I went to work in an area of Vancouver, British Columbia called the Downtown East Side, which is North America's most dense area of drug use. It's like nowhere else in the world almost, where within a few square block radius, you have thousands of people injecting, inhaling, and ingesting drugs of all kinds, living in poverty, many of them with illness like HIV, hepatitis C, in and out of jail, some living in the streets. And so I went to work at a clinic down there. And by that time, I had written 2 books, and I was just, actually, my first book was published when I was living down there, working down there. But at some point, I said, this is be worth writing a book about. So I was going to just write a book about the work in the Downtown East Side, just letting people know who these clients are, who these people are, what their lives are like, what's working with them is like. I never meant to write a comprehensive book on addiction. It's only that when I began to do the research, I realized that nobody had ever written a book bringing together the lives of real people, the scientific data on brain development, what we have learned about trauma and the impact of childhood on people, how this all fits into what happens to addicted people as adults, let alone a broad social view of drug policy and attitudes towards drug addicts. I was amazed that nobody ever brought this together before, because by that time, the research on brain development had been done. It wasn't even controversial. It wasn't controversial then. It's even less controversial now, but still nobody teaches it in the medical schools, which is incredible.
Yeah.
doctors are supposed to deal with mental illness. They never learn about how the brain actually develops under the impact of the environment. So the hungry ghost is an image that I knew about because I had read a book by a Buddhist psychiatrist, and he mentions that in the Buddhist realm, or the Buddhist worldview, in the Tibetan Buddhist worldview, there's these six realms. There's the God realm, which is our transcendent selves, the human realm, ordinary, everyday people selves, the animal realm with our appetites and our lusts and our instinctive drives. Um, then there's the hell realm with our rage and our fear, our terror, our hatred. Then there's something called the hungry ghost realm, where the creatures are depicted with small, tiny mouths, narrow necks, and big empty bellies, so they could never fill the emptiness. So they go around trying to fill themselves from the outside. And that's the realm of addictions. And my contention is that people, no, it's not that some people live in one realm and others live in another realm. We move in and out of them. I can be in the hell realm certain days, full of rage, terror, and less so as I get older and a little bit wiser. But I've been there. Let me tell you, hatred, fear, rage. Certainly, I can be in the hungry ghost realm. I have been a lot. The animal realm. So it's that not that like these are not exclusive realms, but people move through them. But it's my contention is that people in the ghost realm are mostly there to escape the hell realm. They're trying to feed themselves, trying to soothe themselves from the outside, not to feel the fear and the terror and the rage and the anger and the pain. I knew that concept, but as I was writing this book, that's not what I was going to call the book until somebody I was working with said, "You got to call this book In the Realm of How It Goes." And I said, "Yep, you're right." So that's where the title came from. And that's the background of the book. And the most, not amazing, but both illuminating and shocking thing is I write this book and people say, "Thank you. You've humanized the drug addict." Now think about that for a moment. These are human beings to start with.
Mhm.
Why they need to be humanized? And what does it say about our society that anybody should write a book that humanizes anybody else? It says that we don't look at each other like human beings. So that's the background of the book.
Absolutely. And, I think sometimes, well, all the time, with addiction, people get so caught up on the behavior that
Yeah.
it's the behavior they focus on, and they forget that, because what tends to happen, and I see it in families, I've seen it in my own family, was you have one person here and then you have another person here, you have this person's behavior here and you have this person's behavior here, and you have this space in the middle that just no one seems to be able to communicate, and things just crumble and crumble, and the person who's using the 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 unhelpful coping strategies, I suppose, just go deeper into what is that they're doing, and the person on this side just gets further away because they just have no real understanding. And I remember, as I said, in the beginning, from myself going through, I became addicted to being addicted, and it would shift from food to drugs to drink to sex to gambling. It was just lots of different things, as you say, just this attempt to numb the pain, to be able to function.
So your comment brings up 2 points for me. One is, first of all, it's false to say that there's different addictions. You can define addictions by their target behavior. So you could be an opiate addict, you could be a cocaine addict, a crystal meth addict, a nicotine addict, a caffeine addict, a sex addict, a gambling addict, a shopping addict, an eating addict, a work addict. I could go on and on and on.
Yeah.
A gaming addict, a gambling addict. So you think there's all these different addictions. No, they're not. There's a universal addiction process that employs the same brain systems, the same emotional dynamics, the same emptiness, the same desperation to escape from the pain. The targets are different, but the process is the same. That's why you went from one to the other. You were looking for the same relief from the same suffering, just through different target behaviors. So that's the first. So that the whole division of addictions into their target behaviors is false, and it's utterly unscientific. When you look at the brain circuits,
Mm.
the gambler uses the same brain circuits as the cocaine addict, the sex addict, the same thing. The sex addiction is not about sex, is it? Because if it was about sex, and I don't mean to in any way make fun of a serious condition, but if it was about sex, two sex addicts could just get together and have at it for the rest of their lives. But it's not about the sex, it's about the hunt and the seeking and the self-validation of being wanted and the chase and the thrill, the dopamine hit in the brain,
Mm.
which is what the cocaine gives you as well. So there's a universal addiction process. That's the first point. The second point, in terms of your families that you're talking about, I'm writing a new book now. I'll do some self-marketing, but you'll have to wait for a year till you read it. It'll be out next April. The title is "The Myth of Normal Trauma, Illness, and Healing in a Toxic Culture." Okay, so it's a broad look at this culture. And in the book, I interview a psychiatrist, friend of mine from the States, Louis Mel Madrona, who's a part Lakota, indigenous Indian American. And Louis told me that in the Lakota tradition, when somebody gets sick, the family and the community gather around him and they say, "Thank you. You are the one who's taken on the load of the illness in the whole community and you're manifesting it. So thank you for doing that. And we're going to support you in your healing because that's our own healing as well." So addiction is not an individual, biological, inherited, unique disease. It's actually a manifestation of multi-generational family trauma manifested in highly sensitive individuals. But the trauma doesn't belong to them. It neither began with them nor is it confined to them. And unfortunately, in these families, you get the scapegoating and you get the um, ostracization of the one with the most egregious behaviors. But those behaviors represent trauma that whole family is carrying. This is not to blame anybody. It's just to say what the reality is. So a much healthier approach on the part of a family would be, okay, thank you. Now how can we all heal?
Mm. Imagine if we'd done that in our society, though, Gabor. Imagine if we, if people started to show signs of, just their self deteriorating, their sense of self-worth. And imagine if we collectively got together and said, do you know what, I'm going to come round and I'm going to cook you 3 delicious meals every day. And while I'm there, my wife's going to come and she's going to take your kids off for a couple of hours and just you rest. And if we had that supported, um, but I think that all comes down to reducing stigma and having more open, honest conversations around your work, around introducing people to the fact that, I know a few of the questions that came in were around, people being brought up with the same parents in the same family unit. And, getting people to understand that everything is so subjective and to your perspective of what is happening at that moment in time. So you might have the same parents, but they're very different parents to you as they are to your brother, to your sister, and it's all about, but you're a very different person. As you said, the person with the most sensitive person in the family just feels more, they pick up more, they're communicating in a different way.
Absolutely. So no two kids have the same parents. Not
That's
even
it, yeah.
identical twins have the same parents.
Yeah.
Because they may have the same biological parents, but the parent shows up differently for each child. First of all, one is an older child, the other is a younger child.
Mm-hmm.
One is a male child, the other is a female child. One is the more sensitive child, as you say, the other is less sensitive. At one time, the parent might be more or less stressed than another time. At one time, the parent's relationship might be in a different state. And it's not a question of do parents love one child more than the other. Sometimes they do, but often they don't. They love them equally, but they don't show up the same for all. It's not a question
Mm-hmm.
of how much love the parent has. It's a question of which parent does the child experience internally. And the great British child psychiatrist Didaway Winnicott said that even if a mother could be the same mother to all 8 of her children, which she couldn't be, but even if she could be, they would still experience 8 different mothers because of their different temperaments.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you know, in a lot of families, you have one child abused, but the other children not abused. And I've seen families generate great hostility because the one who was abused, the others were in such denial, they couldn't fathom that this could happen in their own family because it totally destroyed their self image.
Mm-hmm.
So the whistleblower actually gets ostracized even more. So, but anyway, the point is, I had 3 children, same wife. I've been married 8 times to the same person because we had to reinvent our marriage a whole number of times, believe me. Our kids did not have the same parents.
No, that's it. I mean, I have 3 children. I have Gary, who's 31, and Gary grew up. I had Gary when I was 18, and he was born into, it was quite a toxic relationship.
Yeah.
And then, and then I had Haley, my daughter, and the same thing kind of happened. And now I have Sonny, who's 8, and they have very different experiences of growing up. And there's always the well, I would never have got away with that when I was. You wouldn't have let me away with that when I was a kid. And then, and then Gary will say to Haley, "But you did get away with that. You got away with that all the time." So they remember lots of different things. But as I said at the beginning, I had put out for people to come in and ask you some questions because I wanted this to be a real sort of up close event. So I'd like to invite in Gary Rutherford. So I have 5 people. So the first one I'd like to invite is Gary. Gary, are you there? Can you get him in?
Hey, how are you?
Hey,
Hi.
Gary, how are you? Introduce yourself, Gary.
Hi, Gabor. Really great to see you. My name's Gary Rutherford, and I'm the founder of a recovery program based in Derry, Stroke, Londonderry, and I'm 10 years in recovery myself. Registered mental health nurse and personal trainer. And Gabor, what we do is we use exercise as a vehicle to get people into a recovery program. We look at the physical and mental elements of that and an educational piece as well. So it's a real labor of love. It's something I'm really passionate about. And that's it in a nutshell. I could talk to you about it all day, but I'm just so delighted to get the opportunity to talk to you.
You just did.
And I had to write some stuff down.
Thank you. It's really nice to meet you, and great that you're doing that work.
Thank you.
And of course, exercise, as you know, releases all the good chemicals in the brain
Yeah.
that people are looking for.
And a lot of the work that we do is very much influenced by yourself. So we're massively compassionate in terms of our approach to working with people. And stigma and shame is a massive part of what we do. We're running a no shame campaign this year, with lots of different elements to that. I've just finished my 4th marathon in 4 days today. Again, it's to raise awareness of the burden of shame and stigma and stuff like that. So it's a massive part of what we do. So heavily influenced by the work from yourself. So this is a really great opportunity.
So thank you. So let me make a comment about shame, okay?
Yeah.
People think that shame is because of bad things that you did. So addicts are ashamed of, look, in my own addictive behaviors, and I was never a substance addict, but I was certainly an addict. I had behavioral addictions. I lied, I cheated, I manipulated my family, I ignored my kids, lied to my wife. Lots to be ashamed about. Ignored my work sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
But you know what? The reality is that it's not that people are addicted because it's not that people are ashamed because they were addicted. It's more the other way around. They were addicted because they were ashamed of themselves before they were addicted. So that the shame actually precedes the addiction. Because addiction always arises out of trauma, which is either overt trauma or the trauma of not being seen and understood and accepted.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're either hurt or you're not seen and accepted for who you are, you think there's something wrong with you, so that the child develops shame about themselves long before they did anything wrong.
Yeah.
So it's healthy to have good, it's good to have healthy remorse. I should have remorse for having lied to my wife. You know, if I promised to come on this podcast today at this webinar, but I showed up inebriated or didn't show up at all, I should have good dose of healthy remorse about that.
Yeah.
Shame is something else. Shame is actually an assault on the self, and nobody should be ashamed of their selves.
I think that's just that's really great. Even though hearing the way that you're talking about that, and even how I can just relate that to my journey, I suppose the shame of not being seen or felt or heard or being different, as a catalyst for my own issues. And I suppose my question is, it's in relation again to, you know, shame, and do you think that there's maybe now been a shift, societally or culturally, in the perceptions of the negative impact of stigma on families and individuals? Do you see a shift in that?
Well, I do see a shift, you know. First of all, just on a personal level, the response my work has received has been just overwhelming, you know, and it's increasing and it's increasing and it's increasing. One of my friends and mentors, Bessel van der Kolk, who wrote this wonderful book called The Body Keeps the Score on Trauma, it's on the bestsellers list perennially. A new book just came out by Oprah and a wonderful psychiatrist called Bruce Perry. The book is called What Happened to You. It's on number 9 or number 2 on the bestsellers list at Amazon. In other words, this conversation around trauma, the impacts of trauma, is getting much more mainstream. You know, Oprah and her conversations with Prince Harry.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, so that the conversation is actually becoming mainstream, not fast enough and yet not broadly enough. It hasn't into the medical schools yet enough, educational system, let alone the legal system. I mean, when you look at Ireland, for God's sakes, uh, uh, the history of trauma there, the historical trauma of hundreds of years of colonialism, and uh, and the divisions between the Anglo Protestant Irish and the Irish Catholic, and the mutual hatred and violence. Then you add the trauma, multi-generational trauma that children were subjected to in the various Catholic institutions by the nuns and the priests. I mean, there's tremendous collective trauma there, you know? And in the jails of your country, like in any other country, the vast majority of people there were traumatized children. This awareness has not entered the legal system yet. In the schools, children are still punished for their behaviors rather than seeing their behaviors as desperate expressions of emotional pain. Medical people are not trained that mental illnesses arise from trauma, including addiction. So the stigma is lifting, the conversation is broadening, deepening. Thank God. It's got a long way to go yet. All the more reason to be happy about this event and the work that you're doing and the work that other people, I'm sure, on this call are doing as well.
Gabor, thank you so much for that. I really appreciate the opportunity to catch up with you. Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure to meet you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming in, Gary. Gary, can I just say as well, see if you want to drop your link for your No Shame campaign for your, how many marathons is it you're doing over the time?
I'm doing 5 in 5 days with the 22-pound weighted vest to I can't even speak on that there, to highlight the burden of stigma and shame that people carry and stuff like that. So I have one to go, one down, one to go.
That's absolutely amazing. It's like 5 marathons in 5 days. So do please feel free to drop your link in the chat box for people to support you should they choose to.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Thanks.
Thanks, Gary. Thank you.
Let me say something quickly. I know people are putting questions on the chat line. I can't possibly follow them and still maintain this conversation. So I'll really have to leave it up to you to put any questions to me, or people can certainly put their hands up and talk to me like Gary just has, but I cannot respond to questions on the chat line. Okay.
Yeah.
It's physically impossible for me.
Yeah, that's it. I'd said in the beginning, Gabor, for people to, so when we put the email out with the link and stuff for the webinar tonight, we invited people to send questions in, and so people sent questions in. So I have questions here, so I'll invite people on to ask questions. But we had said that if we do have time at the end, for people to put their questions in the chat box, and I have an earpiece in, so I'll be able to hear what questions come through if we have time for that. But thank you very much, Gary. And you know, that was an interesting conversation around shame, because what I've found is when I was doing my own work, a lot of what I thought I felt was guilt, was the guilt of the things that I felt I had done in life. And it was through some of the processes, through havening, through CBT, various different things, that I then realized actually it was shame that I was carrying. And for me, what the difference that kind of made for me is, you know, guilt is I have done something wrong, bad, stupid. Shame is I am bad, mad, stupid. And then it almost became like, because I had the shame and believed that that's who I was, I then done things to almost like to have that self-fulfilling prophecy. Well, I am a bad person and bad people do bad things. So and when I sat down and kind of sat with that emotion and sat and was able to understand the emotion and release release its hold and to gain the understandings from that, then allowed me to heal. And I think one of the greatest things for me was learning gratitude, was learning to say, you know, as I said in the introduction, you know, I am who I am because of the things I've been through, not in spite of them. And I started to own that. And I started to, you know, as a 15-year-old, I remember, you know, walking along the street and hiding myself from my mum when she was coming along the road and she was drunk, or she was maybe lying on the road, or whatever was going on. And but now I'm in a place where she taught me so much. She taught me so much about, you know, about understanding energies, about reading the things that weren't being said, about walking into a room and instantly knowing what had been going on in that room for the last hour or two. And without anybody actually saying anything, or coming in from school and simply walking in and shouting, "It's me," and listening for where the voice came from in the house, and just being almost like that super sponge at such a young age. And then spent a lot of time with this sensitivity around emotion and always kind of running away from it, and then learning to sit with it and actually be thankful that my mum was training me pretty much from I was born to do the job I do now and to do it well, because it gave me that understanding.
Well, I understand that point of view, and I'm certainly grateful for all that I've learned. I'm not at the point where I can feel gratitude for what happened to me, you know. Honest to God, if I could choose, I want to be myself. And of course, everything that happened to me has helped to construct who I am. But am I ready to take the step of, I'm glad that the genocide happened and I was nearly sent to Auschwitz as an infant? And you know, no, I'm not glad about that. And am I glad that I passed my trauma on to my kids? No, I'm not glad about that. So I can have gratitude for life. I can have gratitude for all that I've learned. I can have gratitude for the wonderful children I have, for the spouse that I have, for the inspiring, warm-hearted people I meet around the world like yourself, for the flotation in your little magical kingdom that I had one day, you know. I can have gratitude for all that. Can I have gratitude for the events themselves? All I can say is I have gratitude for life, and that was a part of it. That was a part of it, you know. But I also don't want to romanticize it in any way.
No, and that's it. And I think, you know, and it goes back to a point that you make so many times in so many of the interviews and books and stuff, is that, you know, trauma is subjective to the person. I had a conversation today actually with a gentleman, and he was talking about his experiences, and he was in the military, and he was saying that, you know, one of the guys that he had came across recently was living with post-traumatic stress disorder, and it had came from, you know, his time in the military. And he was like, you know, he worked in the kitchens, and we sat and had this big conversation about, you know, it doesn't matter if, it doesn't even have to be in a combat situation. Trauma is your personal encoding, the way you pick up on various different things, the way you store that experience at that moment in time. And you could see as we were having the conversation that it really started to change the way that he's seen that. And you know, and I think, as you said earlier, it is about having these conversations and getting people to understand that trauma is not an event. It's how you then store that event, and how, you know, I firmly believe post-traumatic stress disorder, post-traumatic stress injury is storing of trauma in the central nervous system, and things like fibromyalgia and arthritis, and is storing in the peripheral nervous system.
Well, so first of all, just to be clear, when I talk about trauma, I'm not talking about what happened to you. I'm talking about what happened inside you as a result of what happened. And the word itself is it from the Greek word for wound or wounding. So trauma is the actual wounding and how body reacted to the wounding. It's not the actual event. This is a difficult concept. Trauma wasn't that you were hit or abused or neglected. That was traumatic. But the trauma itself was what happened inside you and inside the body.
Laugh, man.
Now, in terms of other illnesses,
Really?
what I found, there seems to be a bit of a problem with the sound now. Viv, you've disappeared.
Oh, hang on.
Don't be so ignorant. All right. Okay.
Hang on.
Okay,
Turn on there, Gabor.
Is everybody muted?
Well, you're back now, but there was somebody
Right.
talking in the background, and
That's it. Can you hear us now, Gabor?
yeah, no, it's okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
So in my medical work, and then based on all kinds of scientific research, not on my own part, but research that I've read, it's not just mental health conditions that are trauma-based, but most physical health conditions are trauma-based as well. I'm talking about chronic physical conditions like autoimmune diseases, multiple sclerosis, malignancy. That's in a book of mine called When the Body Says No. And the research is overwhelming. Most physicians never read it, but it's overwhelming. For example, let me give you an instance. A study came out 2 years ago. Women with severe post-traumatic stress disorder have double the risk of ovarian cancer. The less severe the PTSD, the less the risk of ovarian cancer. What does that tell us? It means that you can't separate the emotions from the physiology, because the emotional system is part of the same system that also modulates our nervous system responses, our immune system, and our hormonal apparatus. So when things happen emotionally, they have an impact physiologically. In fact, emotions themselves are physiological things. Next time you're angry, check it with your body.
Yeah.
Does it feel the same as when you feel happy? So physiologically, the emotions are physiological. Of course, they have an impact. And so that autoimmune diseases tend to happen in people that take on too much stress in their lives, particularly the stress of suppressing themselves for the sake of being acceptable or of service to other people, which is why 80% of people with autoimmune disease are women, because that's the role that women are thrust into in a patriarchal culture. And minority women in the United States, like Black women or Indigenous Native Indian women in Canada, are at even higher risk. And that speaks to the unity of mind and body. And so not only is so-called mental illness and addiction a trauma response, so is most of physical illness, which is not just my personal opinion, it's also what the studies show. And the question is, why is this obvious knowledge, not just obvious intuitively, but obvious in terms of the multitudinous, voluminous, overwhelmingly clear medical research? Why don't we all know this? Why don't we all know what the Lakota people knew? That illness in a person represents a problem in the whole environment. But, you know, why don't we know? No. I was just going to say, sometimes I laugh. I really do. That I go around the world and write these books and get all this wonderful response and get well paid for saying the obvious. You know what I get paid to say? You know what you get paid to say? You know what Gary gets paid to say? What Bessel van der Kolk gets paid to say? We get paid to say, if you treat children well, they're going to be okay. And if you don't treat them well, they're not going to be okay. That's the whole science. That's all there's to it. Nobody needs to know anything else.
Absolutely. And you know, I in 1992, I had went to the doctors because I was becoming unwell, and it took them 2 years to diagnose a disease called Hashimoto's disease, which is a disease of the thyroid. And the doctor just was going, but you're far too young to have this. You're far too. This is something that's for, you know, women in their older age. And it was only through reading your work that I then understood. Wow, this is why this happened.
Well, let me tell you about old age. Let me tell you about old age, okay? In a sense, you were in an old age. You were in an old age. Because you look at old age, you can look at aging chronologically, counting the days and the months and the years, or you look at what's biologically happening inside the body. Now, one of the things that happens is there's a structure called telomeres made up of DNA at the end of our chromosomes. And telomeres have been likened to the glue at the end of your shoelace, which is meant to keep the strands from unraveling. At birth, we're born with about 10,000 units of telomeres. By death, we have about 4,000. So the shorter they are, the older we are. Now, with chronological age, telomeres shorten, but they also do so with stress.
Mm-hmm.
So the more stressed we are, the older we are. You can actually get younger again by looking after yourself. That's the good news.
Yeah.
But in a certain sense, your body was carrying this, because of the traumatic experiences in your life, your body was carrying the stress of a much older person.
Yep. Yeah, and that makes perfect sense as I got older. What I'd like to do now is I'd like to bring Caroline McGowan, and Caroline had sent a question in, and so I'll let her introduce herself first of all, and then I'll let her ask you your question. So Caroline, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Hello, my lovely. How are you?
Hello, beautiful Vivian. Gabor, I'm a wee bit starstruck, so I am.
You'll get over it.
Yeah. I've been following you for quite a while, and I suppose my question is about complex trauma.
Yeah.
I got off to a great start. I'm a short female Irish Catholic that grew up at the height of the Troubles.
Yeah.
I was the oldest in a family of 8, and both my parents were alcoholics, so it was lots of fun, lots of music, and lots of chaos. But the question I wanted to ask you is around complex trauma. It's no surprise that I'm a complementary therapist, a counsellor, an acupuncturist, and everything like that, trying to find what drove my parents' behaviour, what drove my country's behaviour, and what drives my behaviour. And I know all that theory, but I suffer with night terrors, and I have done for 5 decades. And I've tried everything under the sun to try and reach the pain point, and still haven't got there. So why is our brain so tenacious, I suppose, is the question, around protecting you from your own, your own fears like claustrophobia and I'm quite a gregarious, relaxed person, but when I go to sleep, I terrify myself. So, where's the bogeyman? Can you help me find him?
Where do you want to go to?
Where do you want to go to?
Yeah.
I suppose a place of peace where I don't feel trapped or closed or scared, you know.
Okay. So you don't want this fear, huh?
No.
But the fear is a part of you. And as long as you don't want it, you're rejecting a part of you.
Okay.
So let's just try something, okay? If you're open to it.
Okay.
And if at any time in this process, Caroline, it gets too uncomfortable for you and you just don't feel like proceeding, just would you say so?
I will.
So I need you to protect yourself, okay?
Yeah.
All right. So you get these night terrors.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask you to, if you can, tap in right now and just, you're not in a state of terror right now, but can you conjure up the resonance of that terror in your body? Like where you know, if it was here, or as much as you can tap into it at this present moment, you can keep your eyes open or close them, whatever you need to do, but just tap into that terror as much as you can right now. Is that something you're able to do?
Yeah, kind of.
And don't force it. Don't work at anything. It's just, okay, to the extent that you can. Can you tap into it a bit?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to ask you to tell me where in your body are you experiencing something related to that terror?
It's somewhere between the base of my throat and my chest there, you know, between here and here.
So upper chest up to the throat, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to ask you to pay attention to it, okay?
Okay.
Just put your attention on it right now.
Okay.
How do you feel about it, that being there?
Not a happy bunny.
You wish it was there. You wish it wasn't there, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Are you willing just for a moment to take a different approach to it?
Of course. You're Gabor Mate.
No, don't make it about me.
I thought you meant to trust you. Sorry, I misunderstood you.
Well, that's okay. Are you willing to take a different approach towards this, whatever is here, okay?
Okay.
So first of all, insofar as there's words for you, can you tell me, what does this thing here feel like? Is it tension, like tightening? What is it that you, if you can say in words, which you might not be able to?
Trapped.
The sense of being trapped, okay?
Yeah.
Now that's interesting because, but it's still not quite a feeling. Like, what does it feel like to be trapped? Like, what's the sensation?
Terror.
That's an emotion. Physically, is there something there?
Physical constriction. No, is that right? No.
Okay, so is there constriction there?
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Now, I'm going to ask you a difficult question. This may or may not work, and I have no guarantees here, but
okay.
Just work with it. And if it spontaneously works for you, it's okay. If not, just tell me, okay? Putting your attention on that constriction. Just put your attention on that constriction again for a moment, okay? If you would. Okay, good. Thank you. Now, I'm going to ask you a question. Say whatever comes up, but don't think about it. If you have to think about it, just say, I have to think about it, okay? Don't try and figure out the right answer, okay? So I'm asking you to put your attention on that constriction again, on that sense of being trapped, and ask it what it wants from you. Caroline, what does that constriction want from you?
Understanding.
Thank you. No. You can't understand something and want it to go away at the same time. Those are two double messages. Do you get it?
Not really, no.
Would you like me to understand you right now?
Sorry?
Would you like me to understand you right now?
Yeah.
If I said to you, Caroline, go away, how understanding would that be?
Not very.
Okay. I can't want you to go away and understand you at the same time.
Okay.
This thing you got here, you can't want it to go away and understand it at the same time.
Right.
So are you willing to understand it?
Yeah.
Okay. Just for a moment, I know it's not pleasant. I know it's not comfortable. I get that. But for a moment, can you put aside your demand that it goes away and just be prepared to understand it?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, good. So just put your attention on it again. And let me ask you, how familiar is this feeling to you?
It's the most familiar feeling I have.
Okay. And how far does it go back?
Since Noah was a boy.
Sorry?
As far back as, sorry, it's an Irish humor. I meant since Noah was a boy, from as far back as I can remember.
All right. So it came along when you were, who knows, 3, 4, 2 years old, 1 year old, but something like that, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So what you're looking at here is an infant or a toddler. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, if you recognize it as a toddler, as a young child, a very vulnerable young child, how do you feel towards it?
Complete compassion.
Yeah. How would you talk to it then? If you had compassion for it, how would you talk to it?
Tenderly and caringly.
Talk to it right now, would you?
It's quite emotional.
Give it time. You're not alone anymore, Caroline. You got 60 people here rooting for you and loving you, okay? Now, don't force anything again. You don't have to pass this test. It's not a test. But can you find, if you can find some words to talk to that little one, what would you say?
That you're safe, that I'm here.
Yeah.
That nothing bad's going to happen.
And how about, I understand why you feel the way you do?
I do understand.
All right. That's your night terror. It's a memory of what you experienced as a very small child. It's a memory that's ingrained in your body and in your brain. If you're trying to push it away and if you're scared of it, you're treating your little child like as an unwanted person, which is exactly what your experience was.
Oh my God. That is so beautiful. Thank you.
So
can I just add, Gabor? Because I'll never get this moment again. I have recently created a program for children because, you know, during lockdown, I couldn't do the job that I did, which is a counselor and a complementary therapist.
Yes.
And I couldn't type a sentence. And I managed to put a program together for schools. I'm now out delivering it using metaphors from The Wizard of Oz. And it's 10-year-old children. And I'm completely blown away by, you know, the understanding that they have around metaphors. Our metaphor is something that are the right way to go to help children? Would that be no?
Of course they are. Fairy tales are all about metaphors, aren't they?
Mm-hmm.
Kids live in metaphors. The first 6 years of their life, whole life is a metaphor.
Yeah.
You know, if you look at the electroencephalograms, the EEGs of children, they don't look like the EEGs of adults. You know what they look like? They look like the EEGs of adults under hypnosis. Those kids are living in a dream world. That's why they can be hurt so much. That's why they can also play so beautifully. So kids live and breathe metaphors.
It's amazing that I'm sitting here talking to you, because I have been following you for a lifetime, trying to find this boogeyman. You just helped me to find myself, and thank you so much. You know, because I didn't know that it was a running around, you know, looking for what was right there in front of me. But
well, thank you for thanking me. Are you also willing to acknowledge yourself for your courage and vulnerability in coming to us with this?
thank you. Thank you, Vivian McKinnon. I love you.
Oh, that was just absolutely beautiful. That was so nice to watch. It was just, and I know you, Caroline. I know how much that means to you. And Gabor, you're just
Okay.
What can I say? What can I say? Caroline, thank you very much for coming on. I'm actually just going to move quickly into another.
I'm pretty good, aren't I?
You're not bad at this, Gabor, actually. You should do this for a living.
I should.
You made me cry, Gabor Matty. I'll never forget you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Caroline.
Wonderful to work with you. You know what, people? This is very easy. This is very straightforward stuff. There's nothing complex about it. It's all right here for all of us. It's all right here.
That's it. And it's so elegant, the way you do it. It's so elegant. I'd like to invite Mandy Kelly in now. Mandy submitted a question as well. And Mandy, are you there?
Yes, I'm here, Viv. Can you hear me?
Hello,
Yes.
Mrs. How are you?
My darling, how are you?
I'm very well. Over to you, Mandy.
Right, well, thank you both to you and to Gabor for giving me the opportunity to ask this question. I'm in Belfast, but my sister in Canada, also a huge fan, is listening in too. So I know she'll be intrigued to hear the answer to this. Hi, Iris. When you're a recovering or recovered addict, however you want to look at it in your perspective, and you're trying to rebuild relationships, especially those within your family, how can you go about this without adding further trauma if, generally speaking, a lot of the traumas come from the family situation?
So I just want to understand the question, okay? So somebody's an addict. Are you talking personally, by the way?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you've been through addiction. You realized that the source of your addiction was emotional pain.
Yeah.
You realized that emotional pain was downloaded on you in the family context.
Yes. Or part of it, yes.
Yeah.
You know?
And now you're recovering, you recovered, you want to reestablish a relationship with the family.
Yeah.
And you're wondering, well, how do I deal with the fact that I was hurt in this family? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, it's kind of both ways, that I was hurt.
And that you've hurt them as well.
Yeah, and I've hurt them as well. And how do you go about rebuilding without opening a whole can of worms? Making it worse in a way, I guess.
Well, first of all, you can't make it worse.
Okay.
You can have pain, you can have anger, but that doesn't make it worse. It just means that the pain and the anger becomes on the surface rather than being buried. But that doesn't make it worse. Okay?
Yeah.
That's the first point. The second point is, partly it depends on what your family is up for. Now, certainly what you can do is to say to them, you know, people, having been through my addictions, I understand that I really hurt you.
Yeah.
I did things that were, I don't know what you did, but
nothing I'm proud of.
Sorry?
Definitely nothing I'm proud of.
But you know, whatever you know, in the 12 steps they do this. Have you been through the 12 steps?
I know, yeah, I know about it. It's not necessarily the right thing for me, but yeah, I acknowledge that it works for a lot of people.
Well, the 12-step movement may not be for you for
Hmm.
whatever reasons, and I have my own critique of them, but the steps themselves, one of them is doing a moral inventory
Yeah.
where you just, this is what I did, and you own it,
Yeah.
where it's appropriate. You don't do it so that you can unburden yourself. You do it so that you can, as a gift to the people that you're talking to, if they're willing to receive it.
Hmm.
So if your family is willing to receive it, and if you're open to doing it, you could actually just own,
Oh
like, people,
yeah.
I
Yeah.
really get how my behavior was hurtful to you or worrisome for you, and so on. You can do that. Now, what you can't control is how open they are to looking at the family system and the pain in the family system. You can't do that. You can't make them do it if if they don't want to. You can ask them. You can say, you know, I've learned something, that this pain that I've been running away from and this pain which caused me to hurt you is not personal to any of us. It didn't begin with any of us. It's multi-generational.
Yeah.
And are you willing to talk about that? Not with a sense of blaming anybody or making anybody feel guilty, but just so that we can all together heal. And I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but I'm saying that's the attitude.
Yeah.
If, if you can put out that invitation, and you might even say, you know, there's this guy, Mate or Vandal Cork or Levine or whoever, can you look at this YouTube lecture
Yeah.
and see what you think of it? Or read this book and see what you think of it. You can issue that invitation. What you cannot do is to control how they're going to respond to it. So what you don't want to do is to force a conversation on people who are not ready for it. And then your decision is, can I be in a relationship with people who are not willing to hear that stuff? I can't tell you what to do about that. Maybe you can be, maybe you can find enough space inside yourself. Okay, these people are unconscious. They can't help it. They're not ready to wake up yet. But I still love them. I want to be in a relationship with them. So I'll be in a relationship with them exactly the way they are.
Yeah.
If you can do that, great. If you
Yeah.
can't do it, if that causes you too much stress, then don't burden yourself with it. But that's
Yeah.
the decision you need to make. So to sum it up, you can own your own stuff if they're willing to hear it. You can invite a larger conversation, and then you decide, okay, this is how it is. Can I be with it? Or can I not be with it? That's my advice. If that makes now any questions on what I just said.
Absolutely, it does. And I'm in the very lucky situation where that's happened.
Great.
And we're working our way through, and I have a lot of love and support. So yeah,
Great.
it's more, I don't want to make it worse, you know. So but
You're not gonna make anything worse.
yeah.
All the
Yeah.
stuff that's worse already happened to all of you before when you were much younger.
Yeah, you're right.
Never,
You're right.
never gonna happen again.
Yeah. Move
You're
on.
all you're all too strong and too smart for that and too mature. No, that doesn't
Right.
mean that doesn't mean there won't be painful feelings.
Yeah.
But don't confuse painful feelings with trauma.
Yeah. Yeah. I like what you're saying about trauma isn't an event. It's yeah. Thank you. Wise words.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mandy. Thank you. Yeah, like Gabor, what for your spiritual and emotional well-being, what do you do? How do you look after you?
I'll tell you the most important thing that I do is that the place where my stuff shows up most dramatically is in my marriage. So marriage is real spiritual work because I could be doing great out there professionally. I mean, in fact, look, around the time that I met you or shortly afterwards, I was in the UK on a speaking trip, and my wife Ray came along with me, and we were going to have a holiday speaking trip, you know. So I would give these speeches to hundreds or sometimes thousands of people, get the usual standing ovations, all the thank yous, all the gratitude. And then I'd be a miserable mess between the two of us because I was too stressed and too strained and it was all too much and I was too addicted to all this stuff. Until my wife finally said to me, you know, my friend, you've written a book called When the Body Says No. No, you better write one called When the Wife Says No, because I'm not putting up this stuff anymore, you know? And so that's why I have to do the work. So actually working on my relationship and who I am in that relationship and how I project my traumas onto my mommy trauma onto my wife. That's a huge part of my self-work. And so if you want to know how I'm doing, don't look at me on YouTube and don't look at me at, you know, the talks that I give. And when I look calm and collected, don't look at me in this context purely, but look at what's happening over the dinner table, you know? And so that's an important part of what I do to take care of myself. Okay.
Yeah.
Number one. Number two, in the last few weeks, I've dropped it, but usually I have a yoga meditation practice. I certainly do a lot of self-awareness work. I really observe myself very carefully. Physical exercise. Thank you, Gary. There's not a day that I don't go swimming. I don't bicycle. I don't get on my elliptical machine. I go crazy if I don't exercise for one day. I eat well. I have a very healthy diet. And I'm really, and you know, and I'm saying no where it's too much for me. So those are all the ways that I look after myself.
You know, that is so great to hear, because it's pretty much the things, you know, I float every week unless I'm busy, and then it's twice a week, because if I'm busy, I need it twice a week. Yeah. You know, I'm back at the gym, and, you know, I'm coming up for a big birthday, and I took some advice on what I should be doing in the gym. So I'm now doing strength and conditioning so that I can build a bit more muscle. I drink 2 liters of water every day. I make sure I sleep for 8 hours a night. And, you know, you were saying there about, you know, that self-reflective piece. And I remember going home about maybe 2-3 months ago, and my husband had finished work a couple of hours before me, and he had popped into my work and had said he was on his way home. And then when I got home, he was at home lying on the couch reading his bike magazine. And as soon as I walked in, that I had this feeling, and I thought, do you know, there's no dinner made, he's not done the washing, and all this stuff was going on my head. And immediately I thought, he takes me for granted. And then I stopped and I was like, oh, interesting. What version of me has this activated? And then I had this conversation with myself in my head, kind of saying, do you know, he's been at work since 2-3 hours before me in the morning. He also deserves to come in and lie on the couch and read his magazine. In that second, Gabor, that changed my approach from going in, throwing my bag down, almost like acting like a child. And he would have said, what's wrong with you? And I would have said, nothing. And I would have stormed on by. Instead, I stopped and I put my bag down and I walked in and I laughed. And I told him what I had just went through. And I was like, do you know, that could have really changed the dynamic in this house, just like that. And he says, oh, but now you're in anyway. What do you want for dinner? And got up and made the dinner. And in my head, I was thinking that could have played out so differently. So that whole, and I remember I've done your addiction and trauma course with wholehearted.org. Right. And I think the links are getting put in the chat. And when you talked about your wife getting caught up in her art, and being late to pick you up or not coming to pick you up, and you got in the taxi and you were, and it just reminded me of that time.
Yeah. So as a general rule, we're never upset about what we think we're upset about. So that being taken for granted and not being looked after by the people who should look after you, that's your childhood.
Absolutely.
And it shows up in that instant.
Yeah.
No, that doesn't mean you don't have the right to expect your partner to do his share. Of course you do. But the emotional reaction, that's always the child.
That's it. And there's so many situations that I find myself in, that I feel something rising within me. And because I'm starting to get really in tune I can feel it. I can feel it starting in my kidneys, or I can feel it starting up here, or I can almost identify, where it is that I've stored it. But I'm going to invite someone else in to ask a question now. So the next person to come in and ask a question is Charlie Orton. Charlie, are you there?
Hello, yes, hi.
Hi, Charlie, how are you?
Hello, I'm very well, thank you. Like everybody else, a bit starstruck, but absolutely delighted. I'm so enjoying this so far. One of the best evenings I've spent recently. Hello.
Good woman. Over to you.
Okay. Hi, Gabor. It's an absolute pleasure to meet you.
Thank you.
I'm the Chief Exec of Smart Recovery in the UK.
Wow.
And we very much understand that there is rarely one path, one route, one technique that chimes with everybody in order to recover from addiction and to start to look at the trauma that's happening within that is then manifesting itself in various behaviours that are harmful to them and to their family and friends as well. And I've actually become really interested in essentially the potential dichotomy between the sort of external and internal locuses of control and the external things that happen to us that are traumatic, as you said before, but have an effect of trauma within the body, and how that trauma can then manifest itself as disease or illness. And when we develop and we're looking at the Smart Recovery Programme, things like meditation, mindfulness, Dharma practice, yoga, as you've mentioned before, are starting to hold some space in programs that have been traditionally very much based on CBT, motivational interviewing, REBT. I'm just really interested to hear your perspective on the merits of looking within yourself and finding or seeking sanctuary from trauma or addiction from deep within versus escaping, distraction, CBT types of tools and techniques to help you sort of move on, and whether those two approaches activate different areas of the brain or have a different effect on the brain, or those pathways that have been formed. So just fascinated to hear what you think of those two ways of approaching trauma and addiction.
Right. So thank you. Now, I haven't studied CBT deeply, so you have to take my comments as those of an outside observer.
Mm-hmm.
But the title itself sends up all kinds of alarm bells going off for me, because it's cognitive in terms of what our cognition is aware of, and behavior focuses on behavior. But what we know cognitively is not what motivates us. Our drives are actually subconscious for the most part. And behaviors themselves are not the problem. Behaviors are simply the manifestations of internal dynamics. So anything that focuses on cognitive behavior. Now, I know that there's a million practitioners out there and they all do it differently, and some of them could be brilliant at it. And I'm not here to slag a whole thing, indiscriminately. But at the same time, let me tell you something. I was at an international conference once, and in a European country. And I met a person who's as high up in the CBT world as you can imagine. I'm not going to mention names. And I was at a meeting. I was having dinner with this person and a psychiatrist from the States, who is as high up in the psychiatric world as you can imagine. And I mentioned to both of them the adverse childhood experiences studies. This was 3 or 4 years ago. And I mentioned to them both the adverse childhood experiences studies. Both this top psychiatrist and this top CBT person said, "Oh, what are those?" I mean, you couldn't write the script. Those studies have only been published in 10,000 journals, in major medical and psychological journals. So I think that therapies that don't go deep leave a person short of what's needed. They can help. And also depends on the degree of trauma. Also depends on the degree of presence and awareness and insight of the therapist. Because ultimately, much of therapy is not about the technique, but about the presence and the compassion and the connection. And I'm sure that a lot of CBT practitioners can deliver that. But as a modality, I think one of the reasons it's so popular is because it's so easily to study it. And you can do these so-called studies, but to me it's meaningless. So for me, therapies that don't go deep just don't go where we need to go.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. In terms of CBT, they talk about tools and techniques that pretty much anyone can do. A lot of it is common sense and writing things down and that kind of thing. But there is a growing sense within the smart global community that a focus on what's fundamentally deep inside you is something that's absolutely worth adding in and complementing into this program. So do when you focus in on your deepest self in a meditative or mindfulness kind of state, and people use hypnosis, don't they, and past life regression techniques and all those kind of things that are there to try and activate parts of the brain that may not get activated all the time. Are they able to heal the brain and the disease that's kind of being manifested from trauma?
I think that I think that everybody can be healed potentially if they're open to it and if they get the right kind of guidance. I don't think it's that difficult to get to these issues as people imagine it is. I think that's part of the lack of proper training on the part of therapists, you know, and therapists not having done deep enough work with themselves, perhaps. But I think it's not that complicated, as I hope I've demonstrated a little bit tonight, you know. That's the first point. The second point is that in terms of awareness and yoga and so on, they can be really important tools, because you talked about in the beginning in your comments, Charlie, about the internal locus of control. Well, when Viv walks into her room and her husband's lying on the couch reading a bike magazine, and her natural tendency is to go into an outraged state of upset, there's no internal locus of control there. She's being regulated by what's happening on the outside.
Yes.
And then she says, this feels familiar. This is old stuff. All of a sudden, Viv shows up in the present. Now she's got an internal locus of control. Now, yoga meditation can support that because it gives you some separation. You become aware of, oh, this is arising in me. Like in meditation, you sit there and you say, oh, I got rage, I got fear, but I'm not the rage and I'm not the fear. So that awareness itself is the locus of control. I can notice it, but I don't have to identify with it. So yeah, all that can help. But I have to say, finally, all that can help, in fact, is essential, but not in the absence of trauma work. In the absence of trauma work, yoga and meditation can themselves become bypasses. You can have these wonderful states on the cushion, and then what? You know, when something triggers you in life, you're back where you started.
Yeah, everything's fine until a trigger comes along often, isn't it?
Yeah. And by the way, the word triggered, I often talk about this. So trigger is an interesting, we talked about metaphors before.
Yeah.
What's a metaphor? A trigger is a metaphor. Now, where does that metaphor borrowed from? Weaponry. If you look at a weapon, how big a part of the weapon is the trigger? Tiny little part. Inside the weapon, there's a whole mechanism. There's ammunition, there's explosive material, and there's a whole machinery for delivering that ammunition. That's what's being triggered. So when you're triggered, What do you want to focus on? Whatever little thing triggered you, or the ammunition and the explosive that you're carrying inside. That's where the work is. So I think triggers are wonderful because they get to teach us what explosive stuff we're carrying inside. Thank the people who trigger you because they show you just what's inside here.
I love that. I absolutely love that. I remember the first time hearing you saying that, Gabor, and it just stopped me dead in my tracks. And I was like, wow, that's just like, but you know what, just based on the conversation you had there, and thank you so much, Charlie, for coming on and asking the question. I know that one of the people who are in the audience tonight who sent a question and just didn't want to come on, but she really wanted to. She has lost a son to suicide in the last, just later on last year. And he was struggling with addiction, and there was so many different things that were going on at the time. And even although she knows that this was his life, these were the how he coped, but it still doesn't stop her from blaming herself for what he done. What would you say to her? What advice would you give her?
They're not here with us, are they?
Yes, she's on the webinar.
Do you think she'd be willing to talk to me?
She had said that she didn't really want to come on. She didn't want to come on and talk.
She's scared?
Yeah, I think she, and the thing is, she's probably not. Well, if you're that person, because you know who you are, if you want to stick in the chat box and tell the team who you are, and then we can get you on. I'll give you a wee minute to see if you want to do that.
I promise to be kind to you, okay? As much as my vicious nature will allow me to be kind, I'll be kind, okay? But it's up to you. Nobody's forcing. It's just that I could really help you with this one if I could see you. If you don't want to be seen, I'll talk to you anyway, but it won't be quite as direct or personal.
No, there's no response in the chat box.
All right. Then whoever you are, and whatever you blame yourself for. Well, is anybody else who blames themselves on this call? Who's in that dynamic? Who's willing to talk about it?
I'm happy enough to talk about it, Vivian.
Are you?
There you're there. Welcome. Gabor, this is Ali.
In the chat box, but I probably my technology is not great. It took me about half an hour to get one word out.
Hi, Ali. So are you the one who is blaming themselves?
I am indeed, yes, and really want to thank you so much for taking my question. Actually, I wasn't expecting to come on.
Well,
but
thanks for coming on.
I lost my son last August. He was 25, and he took his own life through years of mental illness and drug addiction.
I'm sorry, who is?
Pardon?
Who are you talking about now?
My son, he took his own life in August.
Oh, you had some kind of suicide. Okay, at age 25.
Yeah. Since he has, he had years of addiction and mental health problems, and I tried everything. I tried everything I could. I keep feeling since he's died that I didn't try hard enough to help him. Okay. And I could have possibly have stopped him that night because I was in the house when he left. Yeah.
So first of all, you're blaming yourself for not having done enough, and even that very night you could have somehow intervened, but you didn't.
I couldn't because I was sleeping. I was in bed, and I didn't wake up.
Yeah. Okay. No, but you're still saying that I could have done something, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Now let me ask you something a bit more difficult, which might even trigger some more self-blame for you. You do understand my perspective on addiction, right? That originates in childhood trauma, which means that not only, according to the blame theory, which I don't for a minute accept. But according to the blame theory, not only could you have done more to prevent his suicide, but that the very fact that he was addicted, you might blame yourself for, because had he had a different childhood, he might not have become addicted. Is that a thought that's occurred to you as well?
Not until tonight. No.
Are you aware that's a possibility?
Yes, now I do. Listening to what's been going on tonight and listening to what you're saying.
So Ali, you have not read my book on addiction?
I haven't, but I will.
First, can I please ask you to do it, because I've had parents come to me whose children have overdosed or killed themselves to thank me for that book, even though I say that it happened in the family of origin. Now, let me then ask you a few questions, okay? First of all, if your child was traumatized, it means you were traumatized in childhood yourself.
Yeah.
Is that not the case?
I think traumatized for me in childhood is maybe a bit strong, but my childhood wasn't entirely how I would have liked it to have been. So therefore, I tried to make Lee's childhood.
Well, can I ask you a few questions? Are you open to me asking you a few questions about your childhood?
Yes.
Okay. You weren't sexually abused?
No.
You weren't physically hit at all?
No.
Okay. Nobody yelled at you?
No. It's more.
Okay. Your parents didn't fight?
No.
Nobody in the family hit anybody else?
No.
Nobody drank in the family?
My dad was an alcoholic.
Your dad was an alcoholic.
Yeah.
How did your dad behave when he was an alcoholic?
He always used to give me lots of money, so yeah, he was great.
No, but when you were small, how did he behave?
He was okay. He would come in from being out at work all day and went to the pub and got really drunk and just literally come in and lay on the floor. I mean, it was never abusive or angry or anything like that. No.
But he would be different when he was drunk than when he wasn't.
Yeah.
Okay. What's it like for a child to experience two different fathers? You never know which one's going to show up.
Yeah, that was hard for me because me and my dad were very close.
Okay.
I have an older sister and an older brother, but it was always me and my dad. We went everywhere, done everything together. But when he came in drunk,
okay,
I can remember just feeling really sad that I couldn't talk to him, or he would come in from work some night and he would tickle me, and I wasn't getting that at the time when he was drunk.
And Ali, when you were sad like that, who did you talk to about your sadness?
Nobody.
Okay. What's it like for a small child not to be able to share their feelings?
Yeah, it was hard. Yeah.
But you say you weren't traumatized.
Okay. Yeah.
This is trauma. This is a wound. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
This is a wound. It really hurts. Not only was your father drunk, your mother wasn't available for you to speak to.
No.
Whose fault do you think that you made that mean?
Probably mine.
Not probably. When the parents are having a hard time, the child automatically believes it's my responsibility. That's how trauma works.
Mm.
If this is happening, I'm just not a good enough person.
Yeah.
Okay. But notice that nobody ever really understood you or saw your pain, saw your sadness. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what you carried into your parenting. Okay. You couldn't help it.
Yeah.
Was that your fault?
No.
What morning did you wake up and decide, I'm going to screw my child up?
Never.
What morning did you decide that today I'm not going to do my best for my child because I wanted to hurt him?
Never.
Okay. What are you blaming yourself for? For not being conscious enough? For not being aware enough, maybe? Now, let me tell you something. I passed on my pain to my children because because I wasn't conscious, I wasn't aware. They've had their issues. Now, I've had nothing like the terrible, unimaginably horrific thing that happened to you. Because nothing is worse than that. Nothing. But we pass on our traumas unwittingly, unconsciously, until we totally wake up ourselves.
Yeah.
So I'm asking you, so I'm saying two things to you, Ellie. Okay. First of all, the sense of guilt that you should do something differently, that's been with you since you were a small child.
Yeah. Yeah,
You know
I
what I
understand
mean?
that now.
It didn't begin with your son.
No.
Secondly, you did your best as a mom. You loved your child the best way you could. You did what you could. And what you could was limited by how unaware you were. But you could not have been any more unaware than you were. And you could not have been any more aware than you were. Nobody ever helped you to understand this stuff. So I'm not imagining that I talked you out of your guilt, okay? That's not my intention here. Because that guilt is very tenacious. All the more so since it's been with you all your life, since you, ever long before you had a child.
Yeah.
But you have to see it for what it is, okay, and not believe it. And I'm hoping that what you'll do as a result of this conversation is to begin a more compassionate conversation with yourself.
I see Vivian regularly for havening and also for hydroids, and I can't thank Vivian enough for what she's done for me.
Okay.
And she has also helped me through stopping me blaming myself. It has got less, absolutely less. But yeah, it's still there in the back of my mind. Had I done that extra one?
Yeah, you know what? It may be true that had you done this, it would have been different. That may be true, but that doesn't mean that you're guilty of anything.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
The guilt is simply what you've been carrying all your life.
Mm-hmm.
Now, let me make one more thing, a suggestion for you, but it's only a suggestion. I've seen this, other people do this, whose children have died of overdoses or suicide or in other ways. They've taken what they've learned and they've used it to help other people. Maybe you're already doing that.
Yes.
Well, you do that, and every time you do it in honor of your son.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah, 100%.
Are you okay for now?
I'm fine. Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate your
okay.
you talking to me. I really do. Thank you.
You're very welcome, and thank you.
Thank you,
Ali,
Vivian.
Ali, thank you so much for coming on. I know when you said that question, you sent that question to me in the first place, and I asked you, and you said that you didn't want to, you didn't think you could. So, like, kudos to you. Big up. We'll see you when you come back in. And thank you so much for giving us your time. Thank you so much for staying overtime. And big love to you. And I look forward to seeing you when you're back in Belfast.
Thank you. So I'm going to make 3 points, okay? One of them is, those of you that are interested in my way of working with people, it's called Compassionate Inquiry. And it's a year-long immersive course for therapists and health professionals. It's very demanding. It's hard work. And we offer it 3 times a year. You can look it up.
There's a link to it, Gabor. We've been putting, so throughout the webinar, we've been putting the link. So the link to your next Compassionate Inquiry course has been posted. I'll get Alison to put it back in just now, since you're mentioning it as well.
There's also a shorter, much less expensive version of it you can get for yourselves. That's not interactive, but it's available. I don't know if you know this, you probably do, Viv, but in a couple of weeks, there's a documentary about my work on addiction that's going to be launched. So people can check that out. And finally, I'd like to talk to you personally when this is over. So do you have my cell number?
Yes.
Or would you call me when this is over? I want to talk to you personally, okay?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. Well, with that, I just want to thank you for inviting me, hosting me, having me. Thank everybody for your participation, especially those of you that asked questions, interacted. I've really enjoyed being with you, and I hope to see you again.
Thank you, Gabor. Take care.
You're welcome. Bye-bye. Take care.
Bye-bye. If anyone wants to stay around to have a chat or wants to discuss over anything that we've chatted about here with Gabor tonight, then please feel free. If you want to put anything into the chat box, or if you want to come on and chat, if you just let Alison know, as I say, I have an earpiece in, so I'll be here I'll hang around till about 15:15. So, but anybody who's leaving actually just now, thank you so much for your time. It's been so nice. I'm still a bit starstruck actually by Gabor, and I remember the first time. I remember when I met him and I picked him up in Belfast, and I had this tiny wee streetcar, and it was like a convertible. We had the roof down. It was a beautiful sunny day. He called me to say, would I be able to come and float? And I was like, absolutely. He says, I have no transport. Would you still be able to pick me up? And I was like, yeah, of course. So I remember picking him up in Belfast and driving over the Craiggantlet Hills and stopping at the top of the hills. And I said, Gabor, you have to see this view. And we looked out, and it was across Strangford Lough, and we could see Scrabble Tower and stuff like that. And as Caroline said earlier, I stopped and I said, I actually can't believe I'm here looking at this with you. I think I'm a bit starstruck. And he just looked at me and kind of went, you'll get over that. And it's still, to this day, it's still one of the things that brings us, well, as you can see, it brings a smile to my face. So an amazing man, I'm sure you'll agree. So thank you very much. I'm not hearing anything in my ear, so I'm just thinking maybe you've all pretty much disappeared.
I haven't, but I didn't want to talk because we're being
Hello,
recorded.
Jackie.
Hello,
How are
you? I'm good, and it's wonderful. And wouldn't you be starstruck listening to him? Isn't he so gentle? Isn't there something so wonderful about him? He's just beautiful. He's got a beautiful essence. So I'm a bit starstruck here on the sofa.
Oh, he is. It
was great.
And even, in person, he just has such an aura, there's such a vibe around him. It's just so infectious, and it translates over Zoom. You can see it over Zoom as well. It's just,
there's a kindness, isn't there, Vivian? There's just a kindness, and it's so you could just see it with the work that he did there with all those brave and wonderful people who stepped up to have the miracle of him working with them, which was just fabulous to watch. It was amazing. I loved it.
Oh, thank you, Jackie. Thank you.
Sorry, can I just say that, I have been living with this terror for literally 5 decades, and nobody has ever pinpointed. Like tonight, I was absolutely blown away. I'm still processing it, He's got such humility. He's just humility, like yourself.
Oh, thank you. I can hear. Somebody's got their
Not me.
I can hear, so it's like a TV or something. No, that's it. Oh no, he just. As I say, I just don't know what to say now. I think my life's now complete. I've just done a webinar with Gabor Mate. Loved it, and loved all your questions, and thank you so much for showing up. And and as Jackie said, stepping into, I think when we experience vulnerability, we experience vulnerability as an involuntary practice. It's something that we look at and we think, oh, I don't like vulnerability, because every time we've experienced it, we've had it put on us. And I think, a huge part of healing is to be able to step into that voluntary vulnerability, to put yourself forward. And, as I said at the beginning, I had so many skeletons in my closet that I've felt so vulnerable that, oh, if people knew this about me, if people knew that about me, how they would judge me, and I was always so scared. And then having the skeletons and standing up on a stage and talking about the experiences I've had and the childhood I've had and the things that I've done in life, but also the learnings I've gained from that, to be able to show up and to stand in your own vulnerability is a superpower. So everybody who came on tonight, fantastic.
I have to agree with that, Vivian, absolutely. I get a lot out of actually talking about Lee. I know I got a wee bit upset there, but yeah, people often say to me, how do you do that? I mean, it's only 8 months. I have to do it, you know, and it gives me that drive and that passion to just carry on doing what I'm doing, trying to help other people. Yeah.
Vivian, thank you. That was a really great night. Hey, two legends, just basically. Two legends in the whole place. So thank you very much. It was really great to be part of it.
No, it was amazing. And hey, congratulations. Well done on your 5, I've said it a million times, 5 marathons in 5 days, Gary. You're some man. Some man for one man, I'm sure they say over here.
I have cankles at the minute, so my ankles are the same size as the rest of my legs. So I just need to get around tomorrow. But no, look, thank you so much.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome.
Right.
Right, well, guys, I have a phone call to make, so I'm going to get off now. Thank you so much for joining me. I look forward to seeing you all at some point, whether it's online, whether it's in Hydro's, whether it's at an event or something. Take care of yourselves and each other. In fact, I'm sure there was that at the end of a programme that used to say, take care of yourself and each other. But take it easy, guys, and I hope to see you all soon.
Thank you, Vivian. It was enjoy your phone call.
Thank you,
I will do.
Yeah.
Bye.
See you later, guys. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody. It's magical.